Cool. Hello, everyone. This is Trish Jenkins on Trish TV, and today I have a very special guest. Doreen Cumberford is a specialist in culture change in being a global nomad. Now, very few people are traveling right now. I get it, but sometimes your culture change is at home. And while COVID's been on, people are working from home. So adjusting to change happens whether you travel or not. And that's what we're going to talk about right after this.
The strongest prison bars are in your head. Leaders and teams, it's time for a jailbreak.
And we're back. Hello, Doreen, and welcome to Trish TV.
Hi, Trish. Thank you so much for having me as a guest today. This is really fun.
It really is. Now, people are not traveling internationally, but you are now let's see, you are Scottish. You normally live in America, in Denver, but you're in Mexico. Now, how did that happen?
Well, I grew up in Scotland, but I have been an expatriate for several decades, probably, let's say, 3 decades. And I did in the 1980s live in America. And now America is our home base, but we still do in our rewiring, because we weren't tired, so we couldn't retire, right? You can't retire if you're not tired.
Oh, I love that. You can't retire if you're not tired.
Not tired. You just can't retire. So in our rewirement, we call this our rewirement process. My husband and I have been doing pet and house sitting across the globe.
Wow.
Now, we came to Mexico in 2019 in December, the 1st of December. And we stayed until March. And suddenly we found ourselves on what they call in Mexico, they call it the fun side of the border. So we found ourselves in Mexico without the ability to go back to our home base in Colorado. So we stayed. Well, we were stuck. We were able to eventually go home last July. And I know this sort of thing has happened to so many people in so many countries, and lots of Australians too. And so we did get to go home, but then we had the ability to drive. It was a very long drive, but we had the ability to drive back into Mexico. And so we'd just been here for a couple of months.
Wow. Okay. Goodness me. Yeah, because there's a bit of confusion around the borders and when they're open and when they're not, and so on. But
yes, and I'm part of lots of communities, like the house sitting community, the digital nomad community, and the expatriate community. And so I've kind of had a bird's eye view over the last year almost of people enduring a different kind of culture shock just by being stranded somewhere, or not being home, or not being in the location that they would prefer.
Wow. And I can imagine when I think about it, because where I'm at home, I'm comfortable, and the COVID hasn't been very bad where I live. We've had some restrictions. But hearing stories about people, particularly the Australians who are stranded overseas and just cannot get home, and then they're getting tested, and then their flights are getting cancelled, and then when they come home, they've got to stay in quarantine in a hotel for 2 weeks, and some of those conditions are really difficult. Like some of the hotel rooms, you can't open the windows.
That's right.
Or go anywhere. And so, that would feel like incarceration. It's a little bit more comfortable. I know a little about incarceration. I know what it feels like to be unable to leave somewhere. And what I do know is that how we think about our circumstances greatly influences our mental health and wellness around how we cope and the after effects of when we come out. So I'd love to talk to you and hear from you the tips that you have to do with adjusting when you're traveling internationally, and then when you are returning back to an environment that may feel different because it's going home, but also comparing that to what people are going through now, because obviously there's less international travel going on. So yeah, tell us a little bit about what you share with people.
Well, my overarching message is something like travel only with your luggage and leave your baggage behind, which means travel only with what you require, but leave all your mental baggage, all the doubt, the wistfulness, any sense of negativity behind. A lot of us love to travel. And travel is a beautiful subject. It is complex, it is novel, it entertains our brains, and it can be quite unpredictable. And we're not always prepared for the unpredictability of travel. And therefore, it's important to see travel, I think, as like a delivery system, like a syringe, rather than the vaccine. And so if we can use travel, it's been very difficult over the last year to do so, to use travel as a way to create your greater purpose in the world, or as a way to develop your own vision and mission.
Wow. So yeah, I really like what you said about, actually, I'll put it up again. Travel with your luggage, not your baggage. And, that's something that I know when I started traveling with my speaking, so many things would go wrong. And I just I started thinking about them as they're not things going wrong. They're just unexpected changes.
Exactly.
And they add to my adventure. So as long as I learned, as long as I stayed hydrated, that I would have a little water bottle with me, and I would also carry some little meal replacement satchels. Because I had one of those travel coats with lots of pockets, and I would have a number of meal satchels with me that I could shake, and just drink. And I mean, it's not ideal, but it's better than some airport food, and I could keep going. And so that it's about expectation, isn't it? That you it is going to be different. It is going to be, there are going to be things that don't happen the way that you want to, and some people are more at ease with that than others, depending on their personality type. But even if you know your personality type likes things to be a certain way, when you're aware of that, you can say, yeah, even though I like this, I understand that it's going to be different, and sort of try and build that flexibility in. But I love that. Travel with your luggage and not your baggage. That's great. It reminds me of that rather unkind, in some of the movies where these Brits are, they're in somewhere. Let's just pick. I'm not picking on Greece, but let's say, wasn't it in that movie with that English lady? She's some arrogant person said, Greece is great, except for the Greeks, because they want their English. They want them to be just like the English in their own country. Not picking on any nationalities, the English or anything, but you're Scottish, so we can pick on the English. And I'm English, so I can pick on them too. I'm English, Scottish, and Irish.
Adaptability really happens between your ears, but you actually have to maintain. We all have a body. We have a physical embodiment. And I believe that the transformational experience that is available through travel is much more deep and healthy and abiding if we will take a much greater notice and pay a much higher attention to the signals our body's sending us, because we are kind of like subconscious machines. What we taste, what we hear, what we smell, it's all back there somewhere in the brain. And at any second, I can be transported back to my 15 years in Saudi Arabia. If I hear a prayer call I heard 25,000 prayer calls while I lived in Saudi Arabia. And if I hear one, my brain just clicks into being right back there. And that happens for all of us.
Yeah, it can have with fragrances too. You know, you
Yes.
smell something and it takes you back to an experience. And that can be good and it can be bad, can't it? Because it can set people into trauma, or it can be something sentimental. So
yes, but I think what's important about that is to notice what we're recording as we're going along and what is of value, and then, you know, look at it as to, so what are my dreams, visions, and ambitions, and am I really in alignment? So I think that each of us as a physical being has some responsibility to ask ourselves the question of, is this place in alignment with who I am? Some people like the beach. I'm not at the beach in Mexico. I am inland in the mountains at 7,000 feet. And most people, when you talk to a lot of Americans, they say, oh, you're going to Mexico, and they have a picture in their head of a beach. And that's not where I am at all. So it's important, number one, to communicate those pictures and the details about our lives, but also, number two, to really pay attention to the messages that our senses are sending us.
Pay attention to the messages our senses are sending us for how we feel about the place that we're in.
Yeah.
How we can adjust.
Yeah, it can really help us to understand who we truly are. If you prefer being in one country to another country, or if you prefer one language to another language, or if you're fluent in a different language, it all affects our cells, and some kind of a transformational DNA is happening.
So I want to ask you then,
yes,
with the restrictions that are on, we don't always have a choice
about
where we are. So there's a couple of ways we can go. We can listen to the discomfort of our body and confirm, this is not right for me, I'm suffering. Or, and perhaps you can advise with this, or sometimes it is that culture shock of, oh, I don't like that sing-song call to prayer. Well, bad luck, you're just gonna have to put up with it, you know, put up or shut up. Or you can shift the way you think about it, so that instead of expecting things to be to accommodate your comfort, how can we adjust ourselves? Because, you know, and compare it to someone who's stuck working from home. Even just that phrase, I'm stuck working from home, instead of I get to work from home and looking for the good. Can you speak into that about when even our body is saying, oh, this isn't a match, this doesn't suit my vibe. Well, that's great. If you've got the money and the opportunities to do whatever you want, whenever you want, to have a luxury suite in Paris, well, that would suit me very well. But you know what? That's not happening. I've got family and commitments here. And so I've got to adjust and choose to be content. So how do we be true to ourselves without becoming a spoiled brat and making everybody else suffer because we're not happy?
Well, I think there's lots of things. There's lots of ways to answer that. One is to really become much more tolerant of your situation and look for something to be grateful in. And, you know, I don't think it has to be all this, you know, it has to be this way or that way. I think when we're in a stressful situation and we find ourselves in a place that we don't like to be, that it is really important to go within and go, so what can I find to celebrate and be grateful for? Can I give you an example?
Yes.
I recently interviewed a woman who was working in China, and they evacuated, or she had to leave China. She's Australian. But her husband's American, so she went to America for a while. She went to Australia, then America, and then went through all the process of going through the quarantine, and her plane reservations were, I think, delayed many, many times. And she got back there, and we were talking about how difficult it had been in quarantine. And my own sister-in-law went through 3 or 4 quarantines from going to see her son who had had an accident in Hawaii. And so for all the people who have had to suffer quarantine, they have had to find ways to cope. And one of the simplest ways is to celebrate the good. Look for one thing to be grateful for. And this gal, two examples. This gal, she took a photograph of something every day, and she was getting care packages from someone. And she'd take a photograph of something that just made her smile and put it on Instagram every day. My sister-in-law got really creative, because you have to get amazingly creative sometimes. She took the food package that she got for lunch and dinner every day, and it was not a very wide variety of foods she was provided in that little hotel room. And she used the bags and the sacks and the plastic containers and did artwork with it all. So every day, no matter the meal, she would draw something on the bags and then put it on Facebook. And that was a coping mechanism. So I think that that's when we do best, actually, when we're pushed to become creative.
I think you're right. It's, boredom forces us to be creative. And it's often said that children who are constantly stimulated, that if back in the days before the, computers and electronics and things, you'd say to your kids, go out and play. Right. And you wouldn't give them all this equipment to play. They would find a stick, they'd find a rock, they'd draw they would become creative, and it would stimulate their imagination. Yeah. And, so, and these days, if you do have access to the internet, provided you find things that are constructive, and not go to the negative things. I wonder if all the angst of last year to do with politics and all that sort of thing may not have been quite so virulent had people been more able to get about their lives normally, and have other things. When you've got time on your hands, you can make a big deal out of things that would not normally take up so much space in your head.
I think that's probably true. And I do think that the internet and television had the ability to terrify us.
True.
And I know that I went through that period when we discovered that we had the opportunity to stay at a rental property in Mexico. And the people said, you can come here and you can stay here in this rental property for 6 months if you need to. That was such a relief to me. And then as it started, when we got back to Querétaro, we came to the city for like 2 or 3 days of touring, which we don't do very frequently because we're not good at being tourists anymore. Touristing is like a very superficial level of being somewhere. You can't really get into the community and meet people. You don't have the time to do that. So you just take what you can from a culture. And when we arrived in Querétaro, we were staying at this ancient convent, which had been turned into a boutique hotel. And strangely enough, had a spa with bathtubs on the roof with curtains around them overlooking the ancient church across the street. And everything closed all around us. In that one afternoon, in the next 36 hours, everything shut down. The restaurants, everything shut down. It was just awful. And so I was very disturbed. And by the time we came to San Miguel to be in this house, I was very scared. And I think had I had less technology, that I might have handled it better.
How interesting.
So I think it's a very good point.
Yeah. Well, it's true. I mean, the news is on, the internet, it's on at will. Unless you're in Australia and you're on Facebook, and that's they're just restoring the news now. But even just for television, the news headlines come at the top of every hour usually.
Yes.
Like when you're getting ready in the morning, and if you hear the headlines 5 times because you're getting ready for your day, it's as if it's 5 times as bad.
Yes.
You hear it once. You only need to hear it once. or if at all. I mean, the things you really need to know find you. But yeah, you're right. Something you said about not being touristy. When I travel again, and when I did, I used to love my preference. Sometimes I'd stay in hotels, but I would love being hosted.
Yeah.
Where I get to stay with a family and do what they do, go where they go, and they would take me to see things that, it's not quite being a tourist, because they would show me the places that the locals would go to and that they would know about. And it would be just so fun.
Yes.
A much more enriched experience. So
a much more enriched and a much more enlightened experience. My husband and I have been, since we've been rewired, I said we have been doing house and pet sitting across the globe. We've gone to about 9 or 10 countries, and I call it being a slow mad. We're not nomads so much as we're slow mads. And we take our traveling in bite-sized adventures. And having bite-sized adventures is, I think, a really good way to approach life. And when you get to go live with a family, you get not only the bite-sized adventure of being the tourist, but you also get the heartfelt global heartedness that comes with connecting with people locally in that place. And I think that is irrepeatable and unmistakably one of the great ways that we can create a global hearted culture around the globe.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. And Doreen, you have had so many adventures because you are a global nomad. Even now, even in lockdown, you're global.
Even in my 60s.
In your 60s. And you have got a book with your stories, but also the tips that will help people with adjusting to different cultures, whether it's going there or returning. So would you like to, you've got a book there you can show us.
Okay.
And Camel Lane.
I like that. Camel Lane, and it's called Embrace the Adventure. And
Life in Camel Lane, Embrace the Adventure. That's great. So tell me about the book.
It's based on living in Saudi Arabia for 15 years. I went to Saudi Arabia, and we were only going to stay for 2 or 3 or 5 years. And the first 5 years, the first 2 years, I did not adjust well. And I had been an expat in previous lives. I had lived in 4 or 5 countries before I got there. It was just one of the hardest adjustments for me.
What was hard?
Well, I was an accompanying spouse without a purpose, except I did have a 3-year-old when we got there, and she was my purpose. But for me, I needed to find who I was, and I really needed to discover myself. Ultimately, the second 5 years were fabulous, and we were able to stay there and give our daughter a super education in a small version of the United Nations, because her school had about 45 nationalities. We had, several different languages were spoken in the school. So I'm really forever grateful that she had that kind of upbringing. And the last 5 years, I was dreading leaving. I did not want to leave. I had adjusted. Yeah. So that's what this is about. I interviewed 60 women on the subject of the changes of us personally living in Saudi Arabia and what we learned. So I call it a learn-war instead of a memoir. It's a learn-war. So it's about the lessons, because if you go somewhere and you spend a lot of time there, or even if you go as a tourist, what was the point? What did you get out of it? And how did it move you forward in the direction of your dreams?
Now, the culture there, you mentioned being in the United Nations culture, which is kind of a culture within another culture.
It is.
So did you have much to do with the outside culture and the contrast, and particularly with your role as a woman?
I found that my role as a woman was very difficult when I arrived in Saudi. Previously, we had lived in Japan because we'd been part of a project that my husband was on. Of course, it was his career leading at that point. And when we arrived in Japan, we met other Saudis on the same engineering team. And so I had met Saudis, and I had lived in the Middle East 15 years before in Dubai, which is much more flexible and flowy. So Saudi was very shocking to me because I was in a compound with a barbed wire fence, and that felt a bit imprisoning, although we did have a beach, I have to say. There was an out. And I got used to the fact that I was invisible. And then 9/11 happened. And after 9/11, we all donned the black Arabic dress, the abaya. And then we went out in public with that on, and I felt even more invisible. I felt like I could strip naked and run down the streets of Al Khobar and nobody would notice. Well, that wasn't exactly true. I'd probably be in jail in 2 minutes. And it was very hard for me to find myself or find my way through that situation. So the book is about adjustment, adaptation, the challenges, and ultimately the wins. What did I learn? What did I love?
That's just fabulous. I would like to draw people's attention to your website. Now, where can they buy the book? Is it Amazon, or can they get it from
Amazon? It's on Amazon. You just look Life in the Camel Lane and you'll find it.
Yeah, actually, I'll put both of those up. So your website is Doreen Cumberford.
Yes.
.com, and so people can get in touch with you there.
Yes.
And I understand you are a speaker as well. So if there are groups who want to hear from you and hear more about you, and I would say particularly women's groups, maybe Sir Optimist International, or even some groups even that are normally in or organisations that are in the habit of sending staff overseas to stay with their families, that they could actually engage you to do some preparation training for them to help to adjust.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
I love to do anything to do with intercultural work, or how we can learn to adjust and be gracious with each other across cultures.
That's beautiful. So that's a great message for everyone in general, and it's also a really good message for organisations that actually their profitability depends on how well their staff perform and adjust when they are overseas.
Yes.
And some of them may even have staff who are stranded in other countries. So I would recommend, if you are part of a company, you're watching this, and you might be on LinkedIn, or you might be watching somewhere else, because this goes out to podcasts and lots of places. If yours is a company that has staff in locations that are not their actual home, then may I ask you to connect or alert your managers to this podcast, but also it's a TV podcast. It's going to be podcast as well as in a few other places. That Doreen Cumberford is someone that they could engage and get and consult with, and perhaps even help with the mental and emotional well-being of the staff that might happen to be in countries that are not their native home and are unable to return home. Or when things pick up again, you're going to be reviving things and sending people around the place, then she would be a great resource for you. So there's a plug for you, Doreen. I think you've got a treasure trove of information to share. So book is Life in the Camel Lane, Embrace the Adventure. And the website is Doreen M. Cumberford. There's an M in there, Doreen M. Cumberford.
There is an M. It's a pain in the neck, but it's been there since the day I was born.
If you Google Doreen Cumberford, she will come up and travel and so on. She is the travel nomad.
Thank you.
And so too, if you need a speaker, both of us are available online. We can present online, or we can do it in person if we're in a position to be able to travel to you, because resilience, adaptation, adjusting, and leading people through those things are areas that we know about. So Doreen, thank you so much for being on the show today. You have been so interesting and such a wealth of information. I'm sure that people watching this are actually, there's your, okay, yeah, did I show you your website? I want to make sure I do that.
Yes, you did. It went across the bottom. Thank you very much. This was an absolute delight to spend time with you and to answer those questions and to discuss all of the facets of changing cultures and moving around the globe. And I hope that all of your listeners will take every opportunity when that opportunity comes along to move and to travel and to enjoy the novelty, the complexity, and the unpredictability that comes from nothing else but travel.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for being on the show, and thank you for watching. You've been on Trish TV.